This is an interview program organized by Transparent Nigeria, an online journal that monitors financial matters in Nigeria and encourages the publishing of fiscal issues in Nigeria. We have here the Governor of Ekiti State, Dr. Fayemi. You're welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's start by asking, what are the most significant challenges that you have faced in leading the Ekiti State in terms of politics and the economic situation in the state when you assumed office?
Well, when I became governor in Ekiti State, I met a basket case. Let me just put it in such blunt terms. There was a ballooning debt profile for the state, almost 40 billion, was made a gaping hole in the state budget. The internally generated revenue in the state when I came in was 109 million naira a month, and I had a challenge. I had made promises, I had given several pledges whilst campaigning for the job. But then there had been an intervening period of 3.5 years of sitting in court, struggling to regain my mandate, and a lot had happened in that period. Yet people were still hugely expectant. They still wanted me to fulfill all of the things that I had promised, connecting all parts of the state with motorable roads, putting a computer on every secondary school child's desk, providing free education, free health care for the vulnerable segments of our population, pregnant women, the elderly, children, and the physically disabled. Of course, reigniting the economic opportunities in the state in terms of human capital development, in terms of industrial development, in terms of investment and tourism attraction, and also achieving gender equality and women's empowerment in the state. I had an 8-point agenda which covers all of these areas, but you can have all the ideas in the world if you don't have the resources to make your ideas come to life. It really wouldn't mean anything to people. So that was the contest in coming to office. But by the time I was a year in office, I'd managed to raise money from the capital market, which was not possible for the previous government because they couldn't even get the legislative approval to access finance from the capital market, and that was required in order to access a bond or development support. So I managed within a year to get that. I had also managed within that year to revive the relationship with development assistance partners. The World Bank was back fully, the UK AID defeat was back in Ekiti, UNDP was becoming more active, UNIDO, all of these players came back and started working with us in developing further our strategic plan. And then within that period, we were able to raise the internally generated revenue of the state from that 100 million that I talked about to roughly 600 million every month. So the hope started being rekindled in the population, and we did not renege on any of the programs. Also, the fact that I was able to openly declare who I was when I came into office publicly and advertise this in the newspapers, give people a sense of hope that, okay, this is certainly going to be different, which was the mantra when I was running, that a year or this would be a different type of government, run openly and run with the people. Because, and in developing budgets, I would go to communities and ask the communities for their priorities. And give me 3 things that you want us to do, and I'll go with commissioners, go with all my leading advisors, and we'll draw up a plan on the basis of what each community had suggested to us they would like to see. And most times, nothing extraordinary. We want water, we want our health center fixed, We want support for our farmers. We want you to help us renovate our palace for the other basic stuff. And this is what we now gather, analyze, and incorporate into the budget alongside our own standard vision for implementation. So that's the context of my coming to office.
Now you just, been past your, half of the term a few months ago. What kinds of disappointments have you experienced in the last 2 years? And in the context of that, what are the things that you think may be difficult to achieve within the limit of your first term in the context of the challenges you met in the office and your overall vision for the state?
If you ask me, really, the most critical challenge that I had encountered would revolve around the values depreciation in our society. Ekiti used to be a place of values, very, very rustic, traditional, honest, dutiful, accountable, meritocratic society. But coming in, I discovered that a lot of things had gone pear-shaped. And people had challenges coping with some of the things I brought onto the agenda. You must take an exam before you become a permanent secretary or a head of service or an accountant general. All principals and teachers must take exams. And they resisted. They got into all sorts of quarrels with me over these issues in a state that used to privilege meritocracy. So we then felt we needed to do something quickly about that. To connect with our history, we changed the motto of the state from Fountain of Knowledge to Land of Honor, and we linked the importance of character and brilliance. That it's not just enough for you to be brilliant, to do well in school, but you need other values that would help you become a better citizen in society. So that's still an ongoing challenge. But I think people are beginning to reorientate themselves to the need to focus on what is good. And everybody knows the difference between good and evil. But if you operate in an environment of impunity, the line begins to blur, and you also take advantage of it, because you see the sense in not doing the right thing, because nobody's going to penalize you for not doing the right thing. And in any society where that happens, that is the result you get. But once people begin to see the reorientation, that look, if you do this and you're caught, you're a goner, things also gradually begin to change. The second is question of resources and the need for creativity and innovation. When we came in, one of our very, very strong vision was that by the time we're 4 years in office, we want an Ekiti that is not as dependent on federal allocations coming from Abuja. And as a state whose provenance was really agrarian, and that's the backbone of the meritocratic progress that we witnessed in the western part of the country in the 50s and the 60s, we felt that there was no reason why we could not revive that in this season. And that's essentially what we've been doing. We've been focusing a lot on agriculture, we've been focusing a lot on tourism, and on investment opportunities in the industrial sector, particularly agro-processing, so that the old approach to locally generated income would become the rule rather than the exception. And progress is coming gradually with regards to that. And it has also managed to prove that it is not the abundance of the resources or lack of it that pushes the vision. It is your own clarity and determination. Because some of the things we do on our 2.5 billion naira monthly allocation, the question that people ask all the time is, how are you able to do this? Where is this money social security? You're putting a laptop on the desk of every secondary school student. How do you do this? And basically what I say to people is nothing extraordinary. It's prudence, it's focus, it's planning.
Yes, at the recent Strategic Growth Forum in South Africa, you mentioned some of your development initiatives, some of which you have mentioned today, and also especially in the area of agriculture. And I want you to actually explain that further, particularly in the context of rice and cassava production, which is very important. And of course, it's linkage, the linkage of that sector, the agricultural sector, to the independent power services that you also mentioned. Can you explain this further and then also draw the linkage? How is the independent power initiative central to your JEPD programs that you have for the state?
Right now, it is the most central thing that we can achieve. In fact, I would go as far as saying that once we're able to achieve independent power 24/7 in Ekiti State, you can imagine a growth rate that is out of this world. Because industry is dead in our state precisely because there's no power. And for agro-processing, it is a sensitive sector of the economy. Just as we're encouraging external players to come, and a lot of them are coming. The Dutch agri-trading companies in Ekiti, Veggie Fresh Cassava is in Ekiti. You have a whole range of players that are coming in. But if we're going to achieve...
Yes, at the recent Strategic Growth Forum in South Africa, you mentioned some of your development initiatives, some of which you have mentioned today, and also especially in the area of agriculture. And I want you to actually explain that further, particularly in the context of rice and cassava production, which is very important. And of course, it's linkage, the linkage of that sector, the agricultural sector, to the independent power services that you also mentioned. Can you explain this further and then also draw the linkage? How is the independent power initiative central to your JEPD programs that you have for the state?
Right now, it is the most central thing that we can achieve. In fact, I would go as far as saying that once we're able to achieve independent power 24/7 in Ekiti State, you can imagine a growth rate that is out of this world. Because industry is dead in our state precisely because there's no power. And for agro-processing, it is a sensitive sector of the economy. Just as we're encouraging external players to come, and a lot of them are coming. The Dutch agri-trading companies in Ekiti, Veggie Fresh Cassava is in Ekiti. You have a whole range of players that are coming in. But if we're going to achieve the purpose of export, because we're also linking that to our cargo airport and our export conditioning center, you cannot have an export conditioning center that functions on generator capacity. It is something that you need unfailing power supply for, so that storage, which is the bane of agriculture in Nigeria today, is addressed effectively, and you can take these things out seamlessly, both to the local market and to the international market. But it's a long-term vision, which is why we're looking at it both in terms of providing power through our dams. We have a number of dams in Ekiti that have the capacity of achieving power supply for the various areas that they cover. But we're also interested, and we've been working with the company now that has won the distribution privatization initiative in the power reform, to put in place both generating as well as transmitting capacity for the existing industry. If we're able to tackle that, because it is small and compact, it can become the model. It's not Lagos that is difficult to, I mean, dealing with 20 million people and dealing with 2.73 million people, they're not in the same league. And with the transparency that has been established and the focus of government, if we have power supply that is constant, that is predictable, a lot more people would want to come and do business in Ekiti because the human capital is also there. That's one advantage we have. We have a literate population. Then we need to reorientate to get beyond just earning degrees that really don't have much value, but skill development is key to what we want to do with them.
Yes, I was actually going to take on the issue of human capital development. You've talked about social services, you've talked about the agri sector, you've talked about generating power. The state, of course, is known in Nigeria, the state of professors. With the crisis in the education sector, when you came into power, what have you been able to do to recreate the tradition of education, the excellence in education in the state?
It's been tough, I must admit, but it's an area in which we've also made significant progress. One of the very first things I did when I became governor was to organize a stakeholder summit, an education stakeholder summit that brought together all manner of players in the field, teachers union, academics, parents, students, you name it. And a number of products emerged from that forum because certain areas were highlighted as in dire need of reform. The first was the merger of the three so-called universities that we had in the state. It was a tough decision because these universities are in various communities where the votes came from, and to remove them and then centralize the university, which is now a model. I mean, the National Universities Commission is now recommending Ekiti as the place to follow instead of just having these mushroom schools that are masquerading as university. I mean, you come to a place like this, for goodness sake, and you compare it with what is called university in Nigeria, and you see that we still have a long way to go. So we did that, ensured that the recruitment process of the Vice Chancellor was transparent, and within the space of 18 months, because all of this happened within the sort of 18 months of being in office, Ekiti State University's record has moved from 76 on the webometric indices to 19. And that's 18 months. And there's still a lot to do. The fact that I've also demystified the relationship between the visitor of the university and faculty and the students has also helped with regular interaction with the students, with regular visits and lecture on campus myself. They know that I am very, very interested in what happens to the education sector. But we've also extended that beyond the university. In fact, the crisis in the education sector has to be tackled from the basic level. Because no matter what you do at the university level, if you don't fix what's rotten at the basic level, it's not going to amount to much. And having been a product of that excellent education in that same state, I know that we can return to what used to obtain, which means focusing on the conditions of the schools themselves. In 2 years, we refurbished and renovated all schools in Ekiti.
All schools?
All schools.
No exceptions?
As I speak to you now, every single school has been fixed and furniture put in all of them. No child in Ekiti studies under a tree or under an unconducive environment. And I'm saying all, I'm not saying a few. And having done that, we've also, at the last count, supplied, I think about 35,000 of our 100,000 computers to kids in schools. And all their teachers have been given computers. But we're not really stopping at that as well. Quality assurance, particularly in relation to teachers, has been a major problem. And one of the ways we've gone about that was to stop the artificial separation of junior secondary school and senior secondary. We've merged them back to what they used to be in the old times, for better supervision, for better management of schools, and for increasing the allowance that we give per child. We're in the process of releasing some of the schools back to their original owners, just like my friend Peter B has done in Anambra State. Of course, we don't have as many private schools as they do. I mean, the missions have majority of the schools in Anambra, the Catholics and the Anglicans, but we have some, and some of them are yearning to have their schools back. Because many of those mission schools still remain the best schools that we have now. Also, we are subjecting the teachers to, because even when you fix all the schools and you put all the right infrastructure and you give the students instructional materials, what happens to the teacher who is in charge of the students? That is the greatest challenge we now face. And that's the area we're concentrating the bulk of our attention. How do we get the teachers to do the job of what they're paid to do? Teach students, and teach students in an accountable manner. If you're a teacher in any of the school here, you take a regular annual license. It's like a medical doctor practicing or a lawyer. And you only do that after you've gone through, a brush-up regularly, so that they know that you're still fit and proper for the job you've been employed to do. And that's what we introduced, a teacher's needs assessment, which has generated so much furore. I'm sure you heard what happened in the case of Ekiti. If we don't pass the exam, we'll be demoted or we'll be retrenched. And it's a continuing struggle. That is a challenge, but that's something that we're not going to balk on. We have a new person in charge of education now, and the marching orders that he has is that we're still going to subject teachers to quality assurance, because you cannot teach students in which 40 out of 50 students you teach fail in public examinations. That is your fault. It cannot be the fault of the students. If it's just 5 or 10 students who did not pass, you can plus or minus say, well, those are recalcitrant, difficult children who really have no future. But if you have 50 students and 45 of them fail, then there's something wrong with you. In any system in the world, you're going to be penalized for it. You're going to have a lot of explaining to do. And that's the point we make to our teachers, that it's in our overall best interest to do this. And I also go to school to teach. Only last week I was teaching English in a primary school, because I think the signaling is important for people to know that it's not just a governor who sits in his office and pontificates about these things, but actually quite passionate about leading by example. It is absolutely important for our people to see that happen, that you walk your talk.
So what's the place for the youth in all your program, especially in the area of employment? Because one of the biggest challenges in Nigeria today
it's
the
youth.
area of youth unemployment.
Absolutely.
What are you doing about that?
It's a big challenge. I mean, luckily coming into office, we were very clear that this is one issue to tackle. And we had a volunteer scheme for youth who have just come out of university and have nothing doing. We pay them a stipend to get involved in a whole range of activities: traffic management, environmental sanitation, teaching, paramedics, emergency services officials, and a whole range of stuff. They do that. And the idea of the scheme is that they go off the scheme when they get something much more permanent. are in the system. So we have about 5,000 youth undergoing that in the state. But we're about increasing that because that then served as a model together with a similar scheme in Osun State for the World Bank to embrace what they call youth empowerment scheme. So there's a Yes So program that the World Bank has bought into now, and they're going to be supporting us to recruit another 40,000 of such young people. But this time around, we're extending to those who have left high school too, not just university, because that way they can be involved in direct labor activities, construction work, and such similar activities.
Now, how do you respond to the challenge of transparency in all of this process? And what kind, and it's interesting that your state was the first to domesticate the freedom of information law. Is that just, part of your public program, or is it actually in the process of ensuring transparency? And so how are you ensuring transparency? How are people able to access information about public, processes, especially public finance? And how open are you to supporting this process of actually ensuring transparency within the system?
Well, for me, to understand my commitment to freedom of information, you have to understand where I come from. I was a civil society activist, and I was very much involved in the process leading to the freedom of information law. I was involved with the media rights agenda. I was involved with the civil liberties organization. I was part of the campaign, even as a director of the Open Society network, the George Soros network group. I chaired the Africa subcommittee of the Freedom of Information, Access to Information campaign. So it was only natural that when I became governor, I was going to be one of those who would champion this cause and continue to push for it to become law at the federal level. And as soon as it did, I think it was barely 3 months after that, I sent our own version of the bill to the Ekiti State Legislature for approval, and they did. So we've had it since then. In fact, my current Attorney General was a very central player in that whole process leading to the enactment of the law. Is it just a fad or a fashion? No, I don't think so. I think for us, transparency enables better governance. And when the people take ownership of government, it's not just because you are compelling them to, it's because they believe that there is nothing they don't know about what is going on. And I'm in a state where people are very, very sensitive to what goes on around them, and if you don't provide the right information, they fill the vacuum with rumors that can be quite damaging. So it's ultimately in our own best interest to give information regularly, openly, and to clarify situations as they come. Questions will be asked. Mischief is always part of the game in politics. But once you have a regular mechanism for sharing information with your people, then it becomes easy. I mean, just last week, Ekiti was adjudged as having the best and the most accessible website by the Nigerian Governors Forum of all the states in the country. And that's basically because everything that happens, you will find it on that website. You find all the laws. You find what we're doing. What we don't have, if you ask the question, there's bound to be somebody who will respond to you. You can email me as governor, you can email all my commissioners, and they'll respond to it. And that, for me, is what governance is about. We're not doing people a favor. It's our duty. Because once you're in public office, you cannot now start complaining that people are prying into your private matters. You are no longer private. Public office is not a private space. And people have the right, even if they're doing it out of mischief, to ask questions. And that's my own attitude to it, and it's helped me.
So finally, Governor, so what you are saying in essence is that a citizen of Ekiti State can ask a question about our 2 point whatever billion this month. What specifically has the government done with it?
Absolutely.
And we'll get a response.
Absolutely. I even do a monthly account in the state on television and radio. I have a program every month where the citizens ask their own questions about anything under the sun, on what I have done with their money. It's their money, it's not my money. And I will tell you, this is what has gone on salaries, this is what has gone on security, this is what has gone on healthcare. It's public knowledge. And that's why I always tell my political opponents that you don't even have to carry any rumor. Just ask and we'll give you the information. The onus is on you to believe what we're giving you or not giving you. But if you have doubts, the Federal Ministry of Finance also publishes what we get every month. So go to their website. They will tell you Ekiti State has received this in month A. You now take that figure, come to us and say, Ministry of Finance say you've gotten this. What did you do with it? It's rocket science. We provide you with the information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Governor.
And that's why it's important for people to know that when you talk about governance, the notion that all you have is a basket case is a wrong notion. And I see a lot of academics in the West, they do that because the focus is almost always on the macro analysis, on Nigeria as a country, not on what is happening at the subnational level. And there's a lot going on at the subnational level that gets totally missing from the discourse that people are engaging out here. So it's important for those of you who are privileged to be involved in these hallowed portals to also let people know that they should never let the perfect become the enemy of the good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Governor.